Author, scholar, Dr. Sipho Sithole explores the rich history and heritage of the famous Kwa Mai Mai in Joburg. In his published book, Mai Mai, Dr. Sithole holds a PhD in anthropology, goes deep as he delves into the history of the gold mining industry in South Africa. And the book also tells a story of a cultural memory, a sacredly preserved place, and just how it became a cultural weapon to resist subjugation. Dr. Sipho Sithole now joins us this morning to share a little bit more about the book. Good morning, Dr. Sipho. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for penning words to paper.
Thank you. I think the last time we spoke, it was via virtual. I was at Howard University. Yeah?
Absolutely.
I don't remember what it was about. I was like, Lizzie and I spoke, but I don't remember what it was.
So I was doing another show, and we were also speaking about the Order of Ikamanga, actually. That obviously brings us to the point about restoring our culture, restoring our agency, respecting what has been done, those custodians that safeguard that. And this was a phenomenal read. I actually wanted to look at how our agency was restored through this process, but also just the history of Kwa Mai Mai. I want to start off with the title, how it's spelt.
Yes.
Let's get into that, perhaps, as we unpack its significance.
Maye, Maye, that's an exclamation. You know, when something happens and everyone's shocked and they have Twalizandle Kanda and they're screaming, like, for instance, what happened with the attempted assassin of Donald Trump. If it was happening here, people would be like, Maye, Maye, screaming and running. It's an exclamation, you know. So it comes from the place itself, the compound, back then. And by the way, the place that we know now, which is downtown Johannesburg, is the new site of Kwa Mai Mai. It used to be just up the road. And how the name came about, it was popularized by the compound manager, who was the manager at the mining compound. As you know, that natives were collected from the reserves and from the far-flung rural areas, and they were locked into these compounds and only go back, open up in the morning to go to the mine. So every time there was an accident, deep down in the belly of the earth, you will be heard screaming, Maye, Maye. Then they knew that a boat was coming up. You know, that's how the name became popular. But later on, it was popularized through the traditional beer, which was brewed in the hostels, because the hostel dwellers became very entrepreneurial and started brewing their own beer, because they were not allowed to drink the white man's whiskey or beer. And that Komboti, the Zulu traditional beer, then became known as Maye Maye. So then they would say Siphuzu Maye Maye.
The agency aspect of this book speaks is a response to dislocation at large as well, and it reframes the narrative about the story, the place itself. Talk to us about that significance as well, particularly as you're incorporating the unique elements of it being a place of healing, also traditional attire, culture, restoration at large.
The compound traces its history from just before the First World War in 1913 or so, when two mining companies went under. It was the Salisbury Mining Company and the Jubilee Mining Company. So when they went under, that compound was then taken over by the city of Johannesburg to accommodate daytime job seekers, but also their sanitation department and the electrical department, who then lived in that compound. And when you are locked in a compound and you are coming from wherever you come from, as you start to think about home and you know that I'm only going to go home twice a year, you relive that memory of the place where you come from, because you have now become unhomely, as they would say. So these natives, to use lack of a better word, coming, whether it was Zulus and Xhosas and Bedis, started remembering the songs, the dance, and everything that they would have been doing back at home, and they started reimagining home in the city and occupied the city and tried to buffer themselves from the unpalatable experiences that they were experiencing. So on weekends, they would start singing and breaking into dance. And when they do that, someone must now come wearing their traditional wear that they would have worn at a wedding ceremony back at home. And then suddenly there was this bright and colorful display of all the melting pot of all the cultures in Johannesburg. Then they started trading in the same goods. Then they would also get sick and because they didn't, all they knew was, I have to consult a traditional healer or a practitioner. And if also they were not feeling well, they didn't know what was happening, they would go and consult. So that divination and the healers and the dancing and the song came about. The Maye Maye that we talk, not the braai place. That's what I always say. People think that where the Shisanyama is Kwa Mai Mai. No. Shisanyama is at Kwa Mai Mai, but it is not
Kwa Mai Mai. No, absolutely. And it also runs the risk of what happened to Heritage Day, where it became Braai Day in South Africa, which is also a case in point. Often traders that operate there, it's generational.
Yes.
And you had 4 years of ethnographic study with this. You've managed to also meet cultural entrepreneurs as well. And a few of them stood out: Tologazi, Sithole, Ndwandwe, Mama Chauke. But I mean, what stood out for you? What did they come to symbolize about the place for you and our history at large?
You know, that cultural preservation, but also preserving the legacy of their great-grandparents. Remember that the second site is 1945, when they then moved to the site. That site used to be a horse stable. And actually, the compound itself is the only compound where people live and trade. Because most of the hostels, you only just live there. It's not a trading zone. And these people who would have moved and started trading there, these are people who would have lost the jobs when the gold had been explored, and now these explorers left, and they left them. As I said, the mining 2 companies closed down. So they had to look at, do I go back home? And there's a saying in isiZulu called Ushawe Igoli, which means you've been beaten by Joburg, and you come home defeated, you don't have any work. They said, no, we're going to deep into our culture, using our cultural memory. We can ask ourselves, actually, we are in this seat. Who are we and what are we known for? So it dates back from people who started trading in 1926, 22. And of course, they've since departed. And this business has been passed through generation and generation. You talk about Mama Chauke. It's interesting because she's the only one really, or one of the few who come from Limpopo, because the place is traditionally occupied by Zulu-speaking people. So this, what you see now, they are preserving the legacy of their great-grandparents and their parents, because they would never shut that door. There's a Mama Kumalo there who says, my dad, she's old, I think she's 70-something. She said, as long as I come in the morning, open that shop and close it, my grandfather sees that I'm still trading.
Yes, it's obviously the fight or resistance against the erasure of history, but also retelling the story of a response to dislocation at large, but also just embracing our heritage and not confusing, you know, the significance of the place with them, the story and narratives.
And the fact that they can occupy the city, a city that tries to ignore their existence and says, but we are here. And we are trading through our own goods and services, and we are not supported by anybody.
Prof, there's so much more to explore, but obviously it's a good time for people then to pick up the book and explore further. Thank you for joining us at this hour. We spoke to, I keep saying Prof, but it's Dr. Sipho Sithole on his book.